Right, time to take a look through the international headlines, and I'm joined again by Alison Sargent in the studio. Alison, papers around the world reacting to that unprecedented announcement from the US President Donald Trump that he will be meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un possibly by May.
That's right, Rochelle. It's an announcement that's really being cheered by everyone across the political spectrum, it has to be said, in the US. A lot of people saying that it's sort of proof that Donald Trump's hardline policy and a lot of those insults kind of have paid off here. It took everyone by surprise, though, particularly U.S. diplomats. The Washington Post reports that the State Department really didn't see this coming, something we've seen actually with quite a lot of Trump's announcements. Not only that, though, the Washington Post is worried that the U.S. is going to have a very hard time preparing for these talks because they don't have very experienced diplomats. They point out that the special envoy to North Korea retired just a few weeks ago. He still hasn't been replaced. The U.S. also has not yet named an ambassador to South Korea. So really, the U.S. has a lot of homework to do ahead of these talks if they're going to come out on top.
Indeed. Well, papers over in Asia are also showing some apprehension.
Right, as welcomed as this development is, a lot of papers are really sounding the alarm and saying, look, we need to tread lightly here. The South China Morning Post says the situation is like, quote, a fiery volcano that's been dormant for 65 years. And they say we can't forget what's at stake. And as you can see in that picture there, we have Donald Trump, Moon Jae-in, and Kim Jong Un enjoying kind of a nice round of darts. You can see they're aiming for peace, but they are playing with nuclear warheads. So quite a dangerous game. Optimists would say, though, that this talking can only really lead to progress. There's a pessimistic cartoon, though, from the Korea Times that suggests otherwise. You can see that wall has been broken down there between the two Koreas, but it looks like each side is just going to wreak havoc on the other now that they've broken through. Meanwhile, Donald Trump down in the corner there is just congratulating himself, giving himself all of the credit for what's going on.
Okay, well, that wall, of course, started to come down during the Winter Olympics last month. Tonight, the Games continue with the opening of the Paralympic Games.
That's right, and North Korea will be participating once again, although this time not under a unified flag with South Korea. The two sides couldn't agree on a map that would appear on that flag. You can see the North Korean delegation arriving in The Guardian there. First time North Korea has participated in the Winter Paralympics. The paper reports that, North Korea's participation here is actually raising quite a few eyebrows. That's because North Korea has been repeatedly accused of discriminating against disabled people in the country. A UN report a little while ago found that people are regularly sent to prison camps for having special physical needs in North Korea. People who have fled North Korea have also given reports about people being harassed by authorities. So it's nice to see North Korea, celebrating its disabled athletes, but The Guardian points out that it does make one wonder what's going on at home for people who have disabilities.
Right, okay. Well, we're moving to Sri Lanka now, where a curfew has just been lifted in the central district of Kandy following sectarian violence, Alison.
Right, this started when a Buddhist man was allegedly killed by a group of Muslim men, and clashes have been going on all week. We've seen mosques and Muslim neighborhoods burned down and vandalized. State-run paper The Daily News is reporting that the rioting is really dying down today. They say the government has arrested kind of the main man they've decided is responsible. The violence, though, prompted the country to declare a 10-day state of emergency for the first time since the end of its civil war in 2009. The Independent writes that since the end of that war, the religious divide has only been growing between Muslims and Buddhists in Sri Lanka, and many of these ideas have been spreading on social media, which has also been shut down this week as a way of trying to combat the spread of that violence. The Independent, though, says that even if these riots are winding down, it's something we're kind of likely to see more of. And you can see in this cartoon from an independent Sri Lankan paper, we see the lion. If you can pull up the cartoon, there's a lion on the country's flag is stabbing itself with its sword, and that sword, it's the wrong cartoon.
Yeah, I don't see a lion
there.
Well,
you can see the Sri Lankan flag has a lion on it that's usually holding a sword, and in this cartoon, instead, the lion has the sword, and he's stabbing himself with it, and the sword is marked racism.
Okay, well, something on a more positive note now. The New York Times is tackling the gender gap in its obituary section.
Right, this was a way of marking International Women's Day yesterday. The New York Times published a series of quite long overdue obituaries for many women who didn't actually get them when they died. Obituaries remain kind of a section of the newspaper that is overwhelmingly dominated by white males. You can see some of these women going by as I talk. I was surprised many of them are actually quite well known, so it's hard to imagine that they didn't get an obituary at the time. People like the poet Sylvia Plath, the American anti-lynching activist Ida B. Wells, the novelist Charlotte Bronte, a lot of really interesting women there.
Very well-known names.
Yeah, some very well-known names, but and then also some names that you've never heard of. So really, the whole series is worth a read.
Okay, I'll be checking it out. Well, finally, for those who are missing US President Barack Obama, they may get a chance to see a lot more of him soon on Netflix. Alison, what's this about?
So Obama is reportedly in talks with Netflix about developing a series. The deal isn't final yet, so we're not really sure what this show would eventually look like. The New York Times, though, talks about one idea that would be to have Barack and Michelle hosting discussions about things like climate change and healthcare. Really, the idea with the show is to give the Obamas a global platform for sharing ideas with the public and on a global scale now that they're no longer in the White House.
Okay, will you be watching that if it comes?
I'm gonna be checking it out.
What about you, Brian? Yeah, me too. I think so as well. Alison, thank you very much for that. Alison Sargent there with the International Press Review.